The current solar cycle 25 is projected to peak in 2024. This is called the solar maximum, and it will last into the early months of 2025. Solar maximums produce the largest amount of sunspots, which produce solar flares and coronal mass ejections, and these are linked to the occurrence of earthquakes. Also, new moons and full moons are known by science to occur frequently during large earthquakes. Another factor are solar eclipses. They tend to occur frequently during large earthquakes. So what does this all mean for the Pacific Northwest of the USA? Well, let's look at the USGS large earthquake data that we have for the Pacific Northwest. I pulled 23 large earthquakes, 10 from Alaska, 7.5 or higher magnitude, 10 from California, 7.0 magnitude or higher. The three largest I could find in Washington, I had to go down to a 6.5 magnitude or larger. And I didn't find any earthquakes in Oregon that were 6.5 or higher, which we're looking at the larger earthquakes, so I didn't want to go down below that. And I went back to 1940. I couldn't find any higher than 6.5 in Oregon. The analysis of these 23 large earthquakes showed that 91% of them, or 21 out of 23, happened either during a solar maximum or a solar minimum, or they happened during solar cycles with average or mostly high sunspot counts during the entire cycle. They happen near a new moon or a full moon, or they happen near a solar eclipse. And so a point here is that solar flares and coronal mass ejections are produced by sunspots. This is the solar cycle 25 prediction model that's put out by the Space Weather Prediction Testbed. It's dated February 2nd, 2024, so it's the latest model that's been released. And you can see here that the maximum sunspots, the first chart here is the sunspot number, they are expected to occur now in 2024 and into 2025. And the predicted max sunspot number, as you can see over here, February 2024 through February 2025. Let's look at the large solar flares that have happened already during the current solar cycle 25, which started in December of 2019. And we're looking through March 18th of 2024, and we're only looking at Earth-facing flares. Non-Earth-facing, they can have an effect on the Earth, but they're generally more minor in their effect. So we had an X-class 1.6 solar flare. It occurred on July 3rd, 2021, and it was Earth-facing. And we did have a large earthquake of magnitude 8.2, which occurred on July 29th, 2021 in Alaska. So that was very shortly after the X-class solar flare. And then we had a smaller M-class 1.1 magnitude solar flare that occurred on 1/29/2022, and it was Earth-facing, and it did cause satellite issues and radio blackouts. And then we had three X-class flares, 1.7, 1.6, and 6.3 magnitude, which occurred on 2/21/2024. And only the 6.3 flare was partially Earth-facing. The other two did not face the Earth. And it was mostly directed at the Pacific Ocean area, so it really didn't, even though it looks like a much higher magnitude, it really didn't have that much effect on the Earth, and it did cause some radio blackouts, but was more minor. But you can see that the X flares are starting to ramp up now that we're entering into the solar maximum. So you can see in this chart that the actual number of sunspots that have been recorded, and this is through February of 2024, so it's the latest data. You can see that the sunspot activity is really ramping up in 2024. And that's the sunspots are where the solar flares and coronal mass ejections occur as well. Another important consideration is that multiple factors were involved. That was fairly common. You can see here by the data that you could have 2 or 3 things. You could have a high sunspot solar cycle count. You could have a solar minimum, and near a new moon, let's say, for the same earthquake. And so you can see the numbers here. 74% of them happened during an average or high sunspot solar cycle count. So that was the most, primary cause factor involved. And then 66% had happened during a solar minimum or maximum. And you also had, 26% happened near a new or full moon. So that's about 1 in 4. And same with the solar eclipse. 22% of them occurred near a solar eclipse. So another factor I noticed that going through the data is that about twice as many larger earthquakes happened in the spring and summer. And that kind of makes sense because this is where you have thermal expansion, of the earth going on because it's heating up. And so it's probably an additional factor that adds into here somehow because there were twice as many large earthquakes in spring and summer, and the peak months were April and July. So let's look at the takeaways of this data. And a bit of a disclaimer, I'm not a geologist, I'm not a seismologist, I don't work professionally in those fields. So I'm basing this on my engineering and technology background and ability to analyze data, and astrology. I'm an astrologer. So that's what the forecast is based on. So what we're seeing here is that the primary factors that enter into the occurrence of large earthquakes are, either a solar maximum or solar minimum, and an average to high sunspot or highly active solar cycle. And so, this solar cycle 25, we're entering into the solar maximum, and that's going to continue through 2024 and into 2025, and really the crest of the curve. It's not just a point in time, it's the crest of a curve. It really, that solar maximum, it goes through 2025 before it really starts dropping off significantly. And so you have the solar maximum period, and then we're expected to have an more average sunspot cycle. So it'll be increased sunspot activity over what you saw in cycle 24, which was a very weak sunspot cycle. So, that you just didn't see a lot of large earthquakes in the Pacific USA, Pacific Northwest of the USA. And so we just need to be prepared for that in 2024 and into 2025, that, there's an increased significant risk of a larger earthquake. If you live or have loved ones on, a active fault line, I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. So, make sure your, family and loved ones have their safety plans, updated. Make sure they've talked, and, if one were to occur in their area, what's the plan? Who picks up the kids? Where are the nearest bridges? What if you can't cross a bridge you normally cross because, it's damaged? And so do you have a backup, a second or third place, that you can cross over in a bridge? Those kind of things. Depends on where you live and what your circumstances are, but, you need to consider those things that are important to you, and only you can define those in your safety plan. But, if a larger earthquakes happen in a metropolitan area, you're probably not going to have your cell phone working, you're not going to have GPS, and you're not going to have fueling stations working. And those are maybe 3 factors, after the earthquake that you really need to consider. So you have to, it really helps to have things planned out ahead of time, because you won't be able to use those things to do it after it happens. And, have your car half filled with gas all the time. so that if you do need to leave, you have gas and can leave without needing to go to a fueling station. And also the other thing is have a bug out bag ready. So if you're told to evacuate or you feel you need to leave for your safety, only you can determine that. But, you know, you have everything ready. It's really difficult to try to do that at the time when this happens, because it's very difficult to think straight and people are panicking, and that's not the time to do that sort of thing. It's just have it ready and you can grab it and go if you need to. Okay, thanks so much for your time. God bless you, and take care.